Welcome, everybody, to the CoS Veterinary Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Andy Roark. Guys, I got a Hall of Fame episode for you today. That's right. That means one of the most popular episodes that we've ever had. This is originally episode 177. It makes me so happy that this turned out to be one of the most popular episodes of the last year because it's my friend, Fritz Wood. Fritz is he is an industry expert, insider, observer, advisor. He does a ton of financial planning with veterinarians. He is just a generally very knowledgeable guy, and I love talking to him. And I think that that's reflected in the popularity of this episode. We talk about the art of pricing veterinary medicine. We talk about how we set prices, how much elasticity there are in those prices, how pet owners feel about pricing. Generally, what are we doing here, and how do we get this right? And I just, that is a question that I hear again and again. I think a lot of us in vet medicine wonder, are we charging what we should be charging? And it's always that balance of trying to keep care accessible and affordable, and also to charge what we need so we can run healthy practices and pay our staff decent salaries. And there's always tension. I think Fritz is such a great thinker. I love the fact that he got into this episode with me and just sort of talked everything through. And so anyway, without further ado, let's get into this Hall of Fame episode.
This is your show. We're glad you're here. We want to help you in your veterinary career. Welcome to the Cone of Shame with Dr. Andy Roark.
Welcome to the podcast, Fritz Wood. Thanks for being here, my friend.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Oh, man. For those who don't know you, you have been a CPA, certified financial planner. You are an industry advisor and observer. You work with a lot of veterinarians on personal finance, things like that. You have been a mentor for me throughout my entire career. I have always looked up to you. You've given me some of the best advice that I've gotten in my career. I'm not kidding when I say that. I love having you here. I love getting a chance to talk with you. You write for Today's Veterinary Business, as well as a bunch of other outlets and everything. And I always look through and check out your column when it comes in. And there was something that you wrote about recently. You wrote about the upsides and pitfalls of adjusting prices. And I've been thinking a lot about this. So I'm looking at inflationary economy. I'm looking at upward pressure to raise wages in the practice. I look at keeping care affordable for pet owners. I just came out of the Uncharted Veterinary Practice Owners Summit. And that was a concern I heard again and again is affordability of care. My staff can't afford, the care that we provide to our clients, and that bothers me. And I listen to a lot of those things. And so I wanted to get in with you and just start to get into vet pricing and where the prices come from, and just start at that level, and then just start to play around with what price setting looks like in our industry. Is that okay to start out with?
You bet. And I appreciate the very kind words, Andy, and I am flattered and honored to be here, and look forward to contributing and hopefully adding a little value. And I think this topic of professional fees is it's probably always timely, and it's probably always germane. Let's before we sort of dive into any detail, I found this interesting. You might find this interesting. In preparation for today, I sort of looked back at presentations I had given on the topic of professional fees. And the most recent one was 4.5 years ago. So not recent. And the one before that was like 6 years before that. So I've literally talked probably about professional fees twice, maybe in the last decade. And then I thought, well, that's kind of odd because I used to talk about it all the time. And so if we start at the 50,000 foot level, what happened? The accounting and consulting firm KPMG came out with a study commonly called the Mega Study. It came out in 1999. And one of the conclusions was that veterinary fees had not even kept up with inflation during the 1970s, the 1980s, and the 1990s. Okay, so it is fair to say that raised a big flag in the profession. And my observation and sort of anecdotal observation is that subsequent to that, so in the 22 years since then, or 24 years since then, veterinary fees have risen at about twice the rate of inflation over that time period. So inflation had been going in the first 2 decades of this century at about 2%. veterinary fees had increased about 4% or even more. So veterinarians clearly, the profession clearly got this message loud and clear. Oh my gosh, we're not even keeping up with inflation. But I would argue that there was sort of a pendulum swung rapidly and perhaps, too far and too fast the other direction. And I agree with you completely. I do believe, let's start at the 50,000 foot level. I agree with you that there's an affordability problem, and increasingly so, right? I mean, I've read things that indicate the cost of veterinary care is pretty comfortable for people, let's say households making $100,000 or more a year. Well, median household income is about 65,000, so that's a problem.
Yeah.
And we're not going to solve this today, but I would argue the problem with that is the model we've created. Let's just round numbers, say 30,000 veterinary hospitals is a pretty expensive way to deliver veterinary medical care. In other words, if you design the profession from scratch to deliver care cost efficiently, it wouldn't look at all like this, right? I mean, for example, there are 6,000 or 5 times fewer human hospitals than there are animal hospitals. There's about 6,000 compared to 30,000 animal hospitals. There's more humans than there are pets, right? So we've got all these really highly specialized, highly capable hospitals that are not used, near capacity. And we've got, and that's a highway. That's an expensive way to deliver veterinary care. And, nobody's going to change that overnight. So we got to talk about professional fees because it's veterinary medicine from a business standpoint. I would characterize it as, a gigantically large number of relatively small dollar transactions. If you take a clinic and you divide and you say, okay, how many transactions were in that clinic last year? And then you divide it by the number of doctors, full-time equivalent doctors, it's going to be 4,000 or 5,000 transactions, per doctor per year. And that doesn't mean you lay your hands on 5,000 animals or talk to 5,000 clients, but, some of those are coming in for medication repurchases and things like that. But it's a business of a hugely large number of transactions at a relatively low dollar amount. So small changes to the fee structure have a large impact on the business because of the number of transactions. So, that's kind of where we are, where we've been. I mean, I'm hearing people struggle with the same thing. There is an affordability issue. The people at the front desk are hearing it all the time. Clearly, this notion of inflation, I just saw today, the most recent numbers are 7%. So everyone is having a larger percentage of their family budget or household budget, necessarily allocated to things like utilities or energy, gas for their car, food at the grocery store, right? I mean, household income's a zero-sum game, right? So if more gets allocated to these categories, less is available here. And it's, I was just looking at some charts today in preparation for this, and, basically business exploded from, about June of 2020 for the next year, from June 2020. That was kind of the nadir was June of 2020. And then from there, the next 12 months through June of 21, things just shot through the roof. And then for the last 6 quarters since then, there's been a marked, and decided decline in client visits and number of transactions, that started again in about the summer of 2021. And that's about the same time, inflation began to pick up hugely about the first quarter of 2021. So I don't think it's a coincidence that as inflation began to rage, transactions, client visits began to decline. And guess what? What happens when you increase fees? You should absolutely expect fewer transactions, right? I mean, and we can talk more about what's called price elasticity and what we know about that in the veterinary profession. But it's it's kind of like you squeeze the balloon. It's not taking up space there anymore, but that air went somewhere else, and it's still in the balloon, just changed places.
Yeah. Do you think that rising prices in vet clinics have played a big part in the 6 quarters that we've seen of sort of declining number of transactions? Do you think there's other factors at play besides that?
No, I think there's a host of factors that have little or nothing to do with the fact that we've raised fees, right? I mean, I don't think, I don't think you can draw that decline. I mean, in other words, fees have increased continuously, right? This isn't just a matter that happened in the last 6 quarters. They've increased continuously. I think it was the inflation that kicked off. I mean, and part of it is the first year that we were comparing against, so of the 6 quarters where things have declined, 4 of those, or we were comparing against a period before that was really abnormally inflated, right? So we would expect it to be back to normal, but then the last 2, we've lapped that now, and so the last 2 quarters we're looking at results from a period that had already been in decline. So and it's going further. I mean, I think visits are they're off 3% or something like that, 3 or 4%.
Yeah.
So here's kind of the way I think we're off. Transactions are down this year 3 or 4%. Veterinary clinics are reporting revenues up about 4%. So that's a 7% difference, right? So my guess is that's the fee increase, right? That's 7% fee increase. So we're down 3 in visits, but we're up 4 total. Well, it's that was the 7% increase in professional fees. I'm assuming, by the way, for this purpose of this conversation, that we're only talking about professional fees. I mean, I think implicit in this conversation has to be that people have good controls in their clinics such that when the prices of products or inventory items change, that is immediately reflected, in a change of their prices. In other words, they've got control over their inventory to make sure that supplier or manufacturer increase in prices are passed along immediately. And they will. I mean, every pharma company is going to increase the price of every product every year. I mean, that's you can bank on that. So you need to have, that needs to be mechanical in the clinic and automated with the practice management system.
What do you, speaking of inventory, so sort of staying on this topic, do you see inventory revenue decreasing in practices, and how does that affect the prices in clinics, right? So I guess I've always sort of wrestled with this a little bit. There's been a perception of mine that more and more pharmacy business has left the practice to go, online to Chewy or Amazon or, or wherever. Does that increase elasticity for prices for diagnostics or for your physical exam? Meaning, it's never made sense to me, the idea that we would run a practice and it's built on this product model, which Time Machine, if you're going back, please set that up differently. But unless somebody does that, that's what our business has been built on. It was, we sell vaccines, we sell products, instead of traditionally we sell our expertise, like an accountant, or a financial advisor or something like that. And so it's never made sense to me, I guess, if you see products leaving the practices, it makes sense to me that revenue has to come from somewhere. It's going to come from our intellectual property, in our services that way. Do you see that? I guess I'm saying, first of all, validate, do you see inventory transactions leaving practices? And when you do, does that leave the ability to raise prices on the other services that we keep in the practice?
Yeah, I think there's several questions in there. I mean, I think the first is, people have predicted the demise of the pharmacy, as long as I've been working in the profession, and it just has not happened yet. When I read the financial or the veterinary press, I would be led to believe that, the pharmacy is completely being crushed by the competition online, let's say. The problem is when I look at sort of data, when I look at, the facts, when I look at, tax returns, when I look at financial statements, what I don't see is a marked decline in the pharmacy. What I don't see is robust growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I more and more I'm seeing clinics choosing to be price competitive in the pharmacy with alternatives the consumer has elsewhere, largely because they don't want to appear to be guilty of what PetMeds accused them for so long of, is fleecing the client. It's like, hey, you can buy it here, you can buy it there at the same price, So, and that still leaves a healthy enough margin, and so I would not abandon the pharmacy just yet. I think there's still great opportunities there, and to improve compliance, which is one of the things that you might do in lieu of price increases, that, because that's one of the things, I hope we talk a minute about, is what are things you might consider instead of price increases, despite the fact I think, fees do need to keep up. I I mean, let's face it. I mean, the bottom line is the biggest expense in a veterinary clinic by far, bar none, is labor.
Yeah.
It's probably consuming 40% of gross income, maybe more. And I believe, and I think most veterinary practice owners believe that people deserve to at least not fall behind to inflation. I mean, I think it's a moral issue. I mean, when I used to work at the veterinary schools, I told them that, build into your contract, and this is not even negotiable, cost of living increases. So you simply don't fall behind. And that's not a reward of any kind. That's just hey, we stay even with last year. But you know what? If I'm making $100,000 a year and inflation's 8%, or if I'm a technician making $50,000 a year and inflation's 8%, I need to make 4,000 more or 8,000 more next year just to make the same amount, just to buy the same number of gallons of gasoline, right? Or go to the grocery store the same number of times. And so it's almost a morality or fairness issue to me that, so if we say, okay, we've got this huge expense that's non-negotiable, that it's critical to your success. If these people abandon you, you got no business left. We got to do everything in our power to try to retain them. And one of those is through, fair and reasonable compensation that a lot, to my mind, ought at least increase with the level of inflation. So, and look, I'll also tell you, obviously, there are veterinarians that I've seen, and practice managers that use professional fees as a cop out, a quick fix. Let's just hit it with that dopamine, and what you tend to have in those kind of clinics. In other words, without sort of changing anything at all about the client experience, let's say, or adding value in any other areas. And I think, if you're charging dramatically more than what you were 5 or 10 years ago, and you probably are, and you're not delivering a substantially different and better experience, then I think you probably are in harm's way. I think client defections, you should expect. I don't think it's just a one-way street where you can hit the button over here and across the board and these fees go up and it produces a lower. That may work for a year, but in year 2 and 3 and 5, I'm thinking your results are going to come back down to earth, because you're going to, nothing more important to a clinic than client retention. I mean, that's, all the data in the world show clients come back more often, they spend more, their pets are getting older, if they defect because they don't feel like they're getting a good value.
I need you to square this up for me. So here's what I'm hearing you say, and I want to make sure. So we're talking about cost of living increases, and we say, inflation goes up. Let's keep the numbers easy and say 5%. So inflation goes up 5% a year. For my tech who's making $50,000, she needs to make $2,500 more this year than last year to buy the same amount of gas and put the same groceries on the table. And all that makes sense to me. Are you also saying, it sounds like you're also saying that while my tech expects a 5% raise to keep up with inflation, you don't think the pet owners expect to pay 5% more so that I can pay my tech 5% more just because another year has gone by. Is that what you're saying?
I think you're not exactly the first part exactly. The second part, I think,
okay,
whenever any of us leave a place of business, including pet owners leaving a veterinary clinic, I think you got 3 things that if I asked you a question, you'd be able to answer them immediately. Question number 1, did you get your money's worth?
Yeah.
Or in other words, was it a good value? Question number 2, are you ever coming back? Question number 3, would you tell your buddies about this place? Right. And you just know intuitively. Now, what we know about veterinary fees, most people are going to find disagreeable because they're not going to believe it. But if you think very long from a consumer's perspective about veterinary care, it is 2 things. It is purchased infrequently, and it's a relatively small dollar amount. So the fact of the matter is, people have no idea what they paid last time. Okay.
Right.
What people know,
how about that?
You remember, you might have only done it once, but if it was a house and you signed a big mortgage, you probably remember what you paid for that house. Doesn't matter how long ago it was, right? If you buy gasoline, you probably know what the price of gas is, not because it's a huge expense, but you buy it all the time, right? Like a loaf of bread or gallon of milk, right? Veterinary care falls right smack in the middle. It's not purchased frequently, nor is it a huge dollar. It's not a life-changing dollar amount. So the fact is, and we did some just fun exit interviews at clinics a long time ago and just asked people, hey, just out of curiosity, what did you spend last time you were here? And frankly, people don't want to answer that question because they don't know. And if you force them
Yeah.
to answer, they'll end up guessing about the same amount they spent today. And then you go look it up in the practice management system, and it's, they'll miss it by 300% too high and too low. The fact of the matter is, and accepting, breeders, maybe accepting people that have a chronic condition with their pet that, are in there all the time. The fact is, but what people do know, so they're not going to, for the most part, not going to notice. Somebody used to say, my fees need to go up 12%. Should I do it all at once, or should I do it 1% a month for the next year? And the answer is, well, would you like to upset your staff once, or would you like to upset your staff monthly for the next 12 months? It's like clients aren't going to know. We're going to, and you, that hurdle you mentioned is a big one of getting the staff comfortable. I tend to be a fan of, and I'm reading more articles about, in the veterinary press about open book management. Let's share with people that, it costs $6,000 a day to open the door here. And this is why, we need to be vigilant, for example, in charging for the things that we do. I think that's a big opportunity, Andy. I think, before I got high and mighty and with professional fees and making big increases, I'd want to let's double check and make sure our controls are really good and we're charging for the things that's happening today in the exam room or in the hospital or in the lab. Because I think, plugging those holes, has an immediate and extraordinary impact on the bottom line. And that kind of thing mitigates the need for maybe as large or as frequent a fee increase.
Hey guys, it's going to cut in here real fast because if you're listening to this episode around the time it comes out, it's the end of the year. It's the end of 2023. And for many of you, that means your CE budget is about to run out. And if you have a use it or lose it budget, this is it. I got something for you. Look at drandroark.com. Take a look at my team training courses on exam room communication and working with angry clients. Those are 2 on-demand courses. You can have them right away. They both got RACE CE wrapped up and approved. They are great for taking them individually or also doing them with your team and then having discussions in your practice. They're made for that. So anyway, great on-demand right now CE is that. Also, take a look at the Uncharted April conference, the granddaddy of them all. April Uncharted Conference is coming up. Registration is open. You could grab your spot right now for that. Or think about being an Uncharted member. Uncharted Veterinary Community is something we started in 2017. It is all about people who love leadership, managing others, and communication. And so we work on that stuff all the time. As a member, you get access to our community, which is super freaking fantastic. You get discounts on things like our conferences, like our virtual summits, things like that. You get our Leadership Essential Certificate, which is 8 hours, and our first and only certification is included with our membership. So you can have it for free. It's a $500 value, but feel free to grab that. If you're like, hey, you know what, I don't want to be a member, just want that certificate, you can head over to Vetfolio and grab the Uncharted Leadership Essential Certificate there and have it right now. So anyway, guys, end of the year budget, CE budget, use it or lose it. You want to make sure that you're using the resources that you have to get the knowledge that you want. And so anyway, I'll put links to all that stuff in the show notes. I hope you'll check it out. If it makes sense, grab it for you. There's, I'm really proud of my team and the stuff that we put out that lets people learn on their own. And so anyway, I'm going to stop talking about this. Check it out. Links in the show notes. Guys, let's get back into this episode. I think one of the big things for me, coming up, practicing as a vet in a bunch of different practices, I do think that there's always some question, and I get it. So there's always some question where you're a technician and that the pet owners you're working with are going to have a hard time financially with what you're going on, whether they told you that or whether you made that assumption, but you have that in your mind that that's true. And so the dog's shaking its head, and you take the cotton tip applicator and you swab this dog's ears and roll it on a slide and look at it under the microscope, right? Stain it and look at it under the microscope. And then you toss that thing away. And then I think a lot of people struggle with that being a $55 service or whatever you charge for it. They go, well, there was no real cost to that. I just looked at it under the microscope, you know what I mean? And so it's hard, I think, for a lot of people to say, no, I firmly believe that was $55 and it needs to be $55 when there's very little hard costs associated with that except for the piece of glass that we put this on. And so it's always been important to me to make the staff believe that the prices matter. That yes, it is $55 and it needs to be $55. And I don't think you can do that without some level of transparency and without a reputation with your staff of being honest. You know what I mean? Like they're smart. If they believe that you're an honest person and you can be transparent with them and say, this is why these prices are what they are. And even if you don't understand why this is specifically what it is, I need you to believe that it's set for a reason at this place. I have found that if I worked in practices and people said, yes, I believe the prices are what they are for a reason, that was a healthier practice of people charging the prices that had been set than places that I've worked where people were like, you know what, these guys are always just raising the prices and see what they can get away with. And the staff did not buy into that. And as a result, you saw all kinds of little, we only charge for one ear sort of stuff that you go, I don't think that's what was intended, but it happens all the time. But that transparency and people believing in the prices, I think that's really important.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I think, and whether that's through open book management, whether that's through confidence they gain, maybe by looking at some industry resources, I'd put a pitch out for the American Animal Hospital Association's veterinary fee reference. I just think that's an invaluable resource for every clinic. It comes out every 2 years and by far the biggest database, thousands of clinics that are certainly AHA and non-AHA clinics. And, and it's broken down by numbers of doctors. It's broken down by region of the country. It's broken down by urban, suburban, rural, and there's thousands of fees in there. So, it's just a reference point, right? I think any comparisons that you could get from similar clinics, I don't think the clinic down the street, if it's not similar, should really matter to you, right? But if you have a high-end, high-tech, well-skilled, 4-doctor clinic, then you ought to be comparing yourself to, in a suburban location, you ought to be comparing yourself to other clinics that look like you. I am absolutely not making an endorsement, and I don't know enough about it and haven't talked to enough people that have used it, but there is a program called Profit Solver that basically is a mechanical process of inputting, the costs of everything, labor, overhead, property, and loading everything up. And so you get and who's doing these things and how long is it taking? And so it's a very objective and it's a technical thing, but it's a way to sort of make all your fees defensible.
I've always liked that program, and I don't have any stake in this. I don't work with those guys. I don't have any connection to them at all. But I've always liked that program, and basically the idea I think that I like about it is you put your expenses into this program. It's basically a big, powerful spreadsheet, and you put your expenses in, and you set your prices, and it says to you, you can't keep the lights on if you price this. And then if you want to reduce the cost of that ear cytology, if you say $55 is too much, I'm going to take it down to 42. It will say, great. What are you going to raise to make up for the amount of money that you just reduced? And I just like that. I just think a lot of people feel like they're floating in space and just making up numbers. And whenever I found myself in my career setting prices and just making up numbers, I never feel good about it. I always have this insecurity that I'm way undercharging what I'm going to end up needing for my business to work, or I'm way overcharging and someone's going to say, how dare you? How dare you charge this when other people charge half this and do just as good a work? Well, I don't want that. I'm not trying to do that. And so to me, I really like the idea of something that gives you a place to put your foot. And so I'll put a link to the AHA vet fee reference. I love that as a resource of, look, just at least get some numbers you can kind of put your foot on. Let's go ahead and play a game real quick here. Where if I came to you and I said, Fritz, I've got my practice, and let's just say it's a 6-doctor practice. And, I want to give cost of living increases to match, inflationary pressures. And I need to get my staff up, and I'm feeling pressure to raise my salaries to retain my staff, which is something I hear a lot about. I am looking at this. I'm thinking I need to raise my fees. What advice would you give me before I did that? So you mentioned some alternatives. What would you walk me through before you said, yeah, let's look at those fees?
The very first thing, Andy, would be, let's talk carefully about this fee increase, or I'm sorry, about this payroll increase,
Okay.
and I think what we need to do, we need to define whether that's built into all future payroll or if that's a discretionary, more like bonus type payout. In other words, back to the technician making $50,000 and we had a 5% increase. One option is to write him a check for $2,500. One is to dole it out, quarterly, or one is to do it at the end of the year. I mean, so, got different strategies there. If people know that's the plan, there's some, and even though it's a total, the dollar amount's the same as far as the employee's concerned, it does give the business owner a little more flexibility in the sense that it's not permanently built into the cost. And you just have to think longer term. I always like to use the example, I started work at, Arthur Andersen in 1986 and had a secretary, and she had begun working there about 5 years before I had been born. Right. And so think of some of the, had there been years like there are now of 7% or 8%, and there were, even higher in the late 70s, real high inflation, you'd have the secretary making $500,000-$600,000 a year, and that's not palatable for that particular position, right? I mean, so you don't want to permanently sort of, graduate out of, and one of the things I'd like to know is where are we now? In other words, I'd like to see what's your total labor as a percentage of your expense. And there are some other things I would tell you that are beyond the scope of our conversation here, but let's look at our staff effectiveness. In other words, let's look at things like, number of revenue dollars per labor hour, number of transactions per total labor hour that give us a measure of, how efficient are we already compared to sort of the averages or the medians and things like that. But so we got to decide, is this sort of paid out as a bonus, or is it part of the permanent increase in the hourly wage or salary on the one hand? And then I think when we start thinking about fees, I mean, I agree that one of the things I think we got to point out, Andy, is what we never want to do, in my mind, is keep a potential client from coming in the first time. We don't want to build up a wall to opening up that door to the lifetime value of a pet. And then even more broadly, which, in my calculations, I just took the AHA fee reference and the protocol I used was like the AHA Partners for Healthy Pets. And if you price that protocol out using fees that people are now charging, I mean, the lifetime value of a dog, probably $25,000, right? So guess what? Pets live in multi-pet households, right? So let's start talking about the lifetime value of that household. Or somebody like me, I don't have multi-pets, but I'll probably have 6 in my life, right? So, so suddenly you're talking about tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars, which is another reason why you want to be fair on your pharmacy prices. It'd be silly to lose the lifetime value of a client because you were $5 too high on flea control. That's bad math.
Yeah.
Right. So, I think we have to distinguish between, the sort of shopped and exposed fees. And look, the first thing I would tell you, I should have started this whole podcast by saying this subject is a lot more art than science. And that's why things like that profit solver tool intuitively appeal to people like you who are, a scientist, or me who's, an accountant. That's because it's bringing some objectivity to something that is really I'll give you another one. I mean, there's inherently people believe things that are more expensive or more valuable and worth more, right? So that's one reason you may want to be the most expensive clinic in town. And one of the odd things about professional fees is we all tend to think, well, it's that low clinic in town that's holding us all back. And that's completely false. It's the highest clinic in your town. It's their reluctance to go higher. And that's why in certain communities you have these, what I'd call, pockets of affluence or pockets of poverty. And it all has to do with the highest clinic in that area and their reluctance or their eagerness to continuously move higher. Because the fact of the matter is, veterinary care is never going to grow less expensive, right? It will always grow more expensive, unfortunately, at least with the model we're using today.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with a bunch of practice owners, and they were sort of talking about corporations, buying into vet practices and stuff like that. And there were mixed emotions, obviously, about corporate practices, especially among independent business owners. Maybe not all that mixed. Maybe just sort of generally kind of negative. And it was funny, but sort of my comment to them, we were talking about the impacts that corporates have actually had in vet medicine, and I was like, they have, by coming in and raising fees over the past decades, they have dragged a lot of practices kicking and screaming into financial solvency. Like they have, as they have, come in and been more aggressive and said, these numbers don't work. We're gonna raise these fees. That makes a lot of other people feel at least okay about, say, well, we have been kind of scraping by, and maybe we could charge a little bit more. And I go, there's been a lot of good from corporate medicine in coming in and just looking at things with sort of an unemotional eye and raising prices. And I think those of us in the trenches, we want to find the balance between keeping things affordable, but also paying ourselves and our staff. And so it was just an interesting conversation of, let's not pretend that corporations have not been good for medicine in a lot of ways. But I, as you say this about, it's not the poorest practice in town that's holding everyone back, it's the richest. And I go, that really makes sense. I really like the way you laid that out. I had not considered that.
Well, it's there's always a price leader in any community, and as you point out, very often that's going to be a corporate practice today. They're not known for low cost. I guess there's one that Thrive Affordable has the $15 a month plan, but it's for the most part they've taken the strategy of high end leader. I mean, they're not even Banfield. I mean, you look at their their wellness plans. I mean, it's not Or you can go to Walmart and look in the clinics where they have, the vet clinics. I can give you some links to the two companies that are operating there, and all their fees are on their website and everything. And it's not. I mean, it's Walmart pricing, but at the same time, I wouldn't say it's cheap. I mean, it's they're I'd hate to think somebody would look at those fees and cause them to increase their own, but you might.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to circle back. One thing I don't think I answered very well on your. If the pharmacy were lost, let's just say tomorrow we wake up and there is no pharmacy in veterinary medicine, then the implication of that is that everything else that you do becomes a lot more expensive necessarily, right? Because you're right, the product business, has basically subsidized the medicine part of the business. And so if the product business goes away in its entirety, then, the services necessarily become more expensive. So I would try to push that day as far down the road as I could. I would fight until I'm, dead. But and it's getting more difficult. But I think if you choose to be price competitive, there's still huge opportunity in the pharmacy.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I completely agree with that too. I really like your position earlier. I have to sit and process it. If you said to me, and it sounded like you said this earlier, the media coverage of the pharmacy disappearing is definitely much more real than the actual loss of the pharmacy. I go, that kind of tracks, honestly. Like, we still, I have not seen a reduction in the pharmacy that I send out the door, even though, it's been at least 10 years of people telling me that was coming. And you can look at the world and kind of see how you squint and sort of see it. But I think your point is really valid. Of that day has not really come in practice that I've seen. The last question I want to sort of ask you, and I want to sort of get you to squint into your crystal ball a little bit. And we talked about sort of corporates in practice, and then I'm looking and seeing a lot of virtual visits and things like that. I got an email from a big pet retailer that has free vet consults by text and by video when you sign up for their auto ship. And I don't think it's free, like you can use this all the time. I think it's maybe you get one free trial, something like that. But basically it was fairly, $15 for a text consult or $20 for a virtual consult. And then it was free with auto ship for X amount of time or things like that. Well, I see a lot of value in that to pet owners. I can see pet owners getting on board with it. When you look and see things like that, do you think that will bring about a radical way in how we price our services or charge for our time? Or do you think that's just going to get kind of rolled in to our current model and things will sort of go on in roughly the same sort of price breakdown, price priority that they have in the past?
I would say my crystal ball is, cloudy, probably, Andy. It's,
Yeah.
I've never been great at predicting the future, but I think what you're talking about represents a threat in my mind. I'm mildly concerned. On the one hand, we've got labor issues, right? I mean, and part of that is, you can't make a veterinarian overnight and yada yada, and people are retiring faster and they're coming in, and the growth in the industry. And so on the one hand, we've got, to me, it's kind of like there's this faction pushing towards a looser veterinary client-patient relationship definition. Look, back up a step. I mean, industry, multi-billion-dollar companies have always considered the veterinary channel to be a stranglehold on distribution, right? I mean, veterinarians aren't notoriously outstanding retailers or merchandisers. For example, they're not open on Sunday very often, which tends to be the busy shopping day. They're less likely to do home delivery and these different things that consumers want, online ordering. So it's, and if you're a manufacturer or distributor, what you're interested in is getting that product in the consumer's hand, right? The consumer in this case is the pet owner, right? So if you look at press releases from the major companies, and they're publicly traded for the most part, so they have to be honest and have to sort of tell you what their plans are. I mean, you see continuously this, what I'd call direct to consumer. And the way I would define direct to consumer is around the veterinarian, right? So if you're a major internet retailer, of course you would have doctors on staff. I'm surprised they would charge anything for a consult. I thought it was free if you signed up for the auto ship. Now, I'm not suggesting that consult is going to take a lot of veterinary services necessarily away from the independent practitioner, but I think it's highly likely they're going to take all the pharmacy, because if that virtual doctor who's never seen the pet, doesn't know the client or anything else, is able to establish that relationship, then they can dispense, right? So suddenly you've opened the floodgates by those companies having their sort of in-house doctors. You open the floodgates. I mean, let's face it, you see the same thing with men's health, right? I mean, you see these commercials of, I guess you're able to establish some sort of client-patient relationship virtually, and they dispense some sort of, or prescribe some sort of products, right? So it's the same idea. It's just circumventing the vet, and I think the forces that are for that are greater than the forces that are against that right now. So when I say that, I mean manufacturers are for it. Consumers, come on, what do you want if you're a consumer? You want home delivery, you want auto ship, you want the free consult. You may never use it, but you want it. You want, a competitive or low price. You want, all those things that you're getting, right? And to a large extent, a veterinary clinic is a single purpose errand for people, right? I mean, they're going there to pick up one thing. So it's inefficient. Those are the kind of things. I mean, pet food, of all things people buy on the internet, pet food's like number 3 or 4. I mean, it's because it's bulky and because people never want to worry about running out. I mean, they just have it auto ship. So that bothers me that, I think the death of the pharmacy's, premature here, but at the same time, the future looks more grim and difficult than the past. And that causes me to, I already think, like I said, we have an affordability problem in veterinary medicine, but if we lose the pharmacy, then it gets really ugly, right? I mean, and then I think you're going to see a real push for things like the Practice Act's changing, let's say technician clinics where they're dispensing vaccinations and doing wellness visits and dispensing flea control and heartworm preventive maybe, and certainly catching a blood sample for a diagnostic test, which is, go look at the Walmart offerings. It's pretty robust. I mean, when they take that sample for the heartworm test and the vector-borne disease test, I mean, they're trying to sell CBC also, right? Just, an extra 50 or $60, something like that. And so, I mean, that's the low hanging fruit, right? I mean, those are things that, as we've discussed, have historically subsidized the expensive medicine that we haven't charged enough for. I think the future, I mean, at the end of the day, consumers, love their pets and tend to love their veterinarians. So nothing's going to change quick.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, it's definitely interesting to look down the road. That's kind of what I was playing with. Fritz, overall, what your final thoughts, words of encouragement, anything like that you would put forward to vets that are looking at their prices?
Well, I would say veterinary fee increases are inevitable. Unfortunately, none of us like it, but it's a fact of life. I find that veterinarians they drag their feet, but once they get around to changing their fees, I've never had someone regret it. One of the great things about fee increases is they're absolutely revocable. So look at it as a no sweat decision. You can change your mind. I've never seen anybody do that, but you can always change your mind. You can go back to the way you used to do it. So it's safe. There's a net there. Anything you can make it more defensible through some of the tools we talked about today, so it's well received by the staff, is very important. And look for these other opportunities. Make sure you're charging for everything that's happening. I mean, make sure, that we're trying to get that pet in there for one extra visit. Those kind of things necessitate a much less frequent fee increase. So let's make sure we're doing the blocking and tackling too. And because there is a ceiling, and I think we're hitting it now in terms of affordability. And I think we're getting close to. So I appreciate the opportunity to participate today, Andy. Thank you.
Well, yeah, thanks for being here. Where can people find you online? Where can they learn more, Fritz?
Just fritzwood.com. Or just Google Fritz Wood, and you'll find telephone number and email address and website and all those kind of things. Also LinkedIn and Facebook, but the best would be email.
All right, perfect. Well, I'll go ahead and put links in the show notes. Thanks so much for being here, guys. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you got something out of today. And that's it, guys. That's what I got for you. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. I hope you're like, man, I see why that was a Hall of Fame episode. That was really darn good. If you're sitting there thinking, man, that was really darn good, do me a favor. It's a nice end of the year. It's like a belated holiday present to Andy. And that would be an honest review wherever you get your podcast. It's how people find the show. It means the world to me. So if you got a second and you just want to do something nice to wrap up the year with or start off the new year with, that's a nice thing that you could do for me. I would be eternally grateful. Anyway, take care of yourselves, everybody. Get ready for a great 2024. I'll talk to you later.